Alpha Vampire heard crying from the abandoned castle. The child inside knew his darkest secret. Mist rolled over the land like a living thing, curling around jagged rocks and crumbling walls, whispering secrets of the past. At the very heart of this forsaken realm stood Blackthorn Castle, an ancient fortress of stone, abandoned by men but never by time. Its towers, dark and jagged against the night sky, seemed to pierce the heavens. No bird dared nest in its shadow. No traveler dared approach. And yet on this night, a single, fragile sound broke the silence. A soft, plaintive cry echoing through the corridors, bouncing off empty walls as though the stones themselves remembered it. Lord Kale, the alpha vampire of legend, stood atop the highest tower of a distant hill, his piercing golden eyes cutting through the darkness. He was a figure of power and fear, a creature whose name alone had inspired awe and terror across kingdoms. Centuries of solitude and conquest had hardened him, his heart wrapped in ice beneath the veneer of strength. Yet tonight, that same heart stirred with a faint, unfamiliar rhythm, a call he could neither ignore nor explain. The cry came again, sharper this time, carried on the wind like a fragile plea. Kale's sharp instincts twitched. No human should dare venture near Blackthorn Castle, not with the stories that clung to its stones like ivy. And yet there was something in that sound, something familiar, though he could not place it. His fangs, hidden behind a pale, solemn smile, itched with the hunger not for blood, but for answers. Without another thought, Kale spread his dark cloak around his shoulders and descended the hill with the grace of a shadow, moving like a whisper through the fog. As he approached the castle gates, the mist thickened, swirling around him as if aware of his presence. The massive wooden doors groaned, responding to some unseen memory, and swung open with a slow, mournful creak. Inside, the castle was more ruin than home. Dust floated through the air, illuminated in streaks of pale moonlight, and the scent of damp stone and decay clung to everything. The cry came again. It was no longer a mere sound but a beacon. Kale followed it through the winding corridors, past shattered windows and halls where portraits of long-dead rulers stared down with accusing eyes. Every step echoed like a drumbeat, reminding him that he was not entirely alone. And then in the heart of the castle he saw her, or rather him, for it was a child. The boy was small, no older than 8 or 9, with wide, curious eyes that shimmered like polished amber in the moonlight. His dark hair fell in soft waves around his pale face, framing features both delicate and determined. He stood in a circular hall, surrounded by the shadows of broken statues and fallen banners, and he did not flinch at Kale's sudden appearance. "You shouldn't be here," Kale said, his voice deep and commanding, carrying the weight of centuries. He expected fear, trembling, perhaps even tears. What he did not expect was the child's calm, steady gaze. "I know," the boy replied softly, his voice clear and strangely confident. "But you're here now, so I'm not afraid." Kale paused, taken aback. The words were simple, yet they carried a strength he had not felt in centuries. Something stirred within him, a pang he had long thought dead, a mixture of curiosity, caution, and perhaps hope. "Who are you?" Kale asked, moving closer, his eyes narrowing. "And why are you in Blackthorn Castle alone?" The child tilted his head, considering the question. "I live here," he said. "Or I used to, but it's empty now mostly, except for you." Kale's brow furrowed. "I am no friend," he said, though the words rang hollow even to his own ears. "And yet you call me here, calling out as if you knew I would come." The boy's gaze did not waver. "I know your name," he said quietly. "I know what you've done. I know your secret." Kale's heart, long accustomed to solitude, skipped a beat. Secrets were weapons he had kept for centuries, shields he had raised against the world. How could this child, this fragile small human, know what even kings and queens had feared? "You cannot possibly understand," he said, his voice tight. "No one knows." The boy shook his head. "I know more than you think. I've always known." Kale felt a strange pull, a magnetic force he could neither name nor resist. He had lived through centuries of power, of war, of conquest. He had faced enemies whose cruelty rivaled his own, yet he had never met one like this. Not someone so small and yet so terrifying in their knowledge of him. "Why?" he whispered almost to himself. "Why do you know?" The boy stepped closer, and in the shadows of the hall, Cale could see the light of something ancient in his eyes, a wisdom beyond years, a clarity that pierced the veil of the vampire's own mind. "Because someone had to," he said simply. "Because the truth cannot stay hidden forever." Cale's fangs itched with the need to protect his secret, to crush the child beneath the weight of his power, and yet he did nothing. He could not. There was something in the child's gaze, some delicate defiance that held him in place. A part of him, the part that had long forgotten what it meant to feel, wanted to trust this small creature. And another part, darker and sharper, whispered that this trust would be his undoing. "You will regret knowing me," Cale said finally, his voice low, almost a growl. The boy's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Perhaps," he said, "but I already know." Cale stepped closer, his golden eyes searching the boy's face for any sign of deceit. He found none. Instead, he found a mirror of something he had lost long ago: innocence, courage, and a touch of sorrow. He felt the weight of centuries pressing against him, the burden of his past sins, and for the first time in hundreds of years, he felt vulnerable. "You are bold," he said almost grudgingly, "too bold for your own good. And you are afraid," the boy said softly, stepping closer still. "Afraid of what I might see." Cale's chest tightened. No one had spoken to him this way in centuries. No one had dared call out the truth of him so plainly, and yet he could not look away. The child's gaze wandered to the hall around them, to the shadows that clung to every corner. "This place remembers," he said. "It remembers everything, and it remembers you." Cale's lips tightened. The castle was not merely stone and dust. It was alive with history, with memory, with ghosts of the past. And now, with this child here, it seemed to awaken again, whispering truths he had long tried to bury. "You should leave," he said finally, his voice a mix of command and warning. "This castle is no place for the living." The boy shook his head. "I can't, not yet, not until I know the rest." Cale's eyes narrowed. "The rest of what?" The child's voice dropped to a whisper, so soft that it barely carried through the hall. "The rest of your secret." For a long moment, Cale said nothing. The words hung in the air like smoke, twisting and curling around the pillars and shadows. The truth he had hidden for centuries, the sins, the regrets, the broken bonds, was laid bare in the simplest of statements, spoken by someone who had no right to know. And yet they had. Cale felt a shiver run through him, a mixture of fear and fascination. He had faced armies, magicians, and creatures of darkness. Yet this child, standing there with nothing but courage and clarity, unsettled him more than all of them combined. "Why do you seek it?" Cale asked finally, his voice softer, almost gentle, though still edged with authority. "Why do you want to know my secret?" The boy looked up at him, amber eyes steady and unwavering. "Because secrets are dangerous when left alone. Because if you do not face them, you will never be free. And because I think even you want to be free." Cale's heart, a heart that had not beat in the way humans understood for centuries, stirred at the words. Freedom, redemption, something he had long thought impossible. The boy was small, fragile, and yet in his words there was power, a strange kind of magic that no spell could summon. For the first time in centuries, Cale felt an unfamiliar urge, not for power, not for conquest, but to protect, to guide, to understand. And yet, even as he reached out, a shadow stirred in the corner of the hall. Something watched them, something that had waited, silent and patient, for this very moment. Cale's eyes narrowed. His fangs glimmered faintly in the pale moonlight. The child, sensing the shift, took a cautious step back, yet did not flinch. He had faced fear before. Perhaps he would face it again. "Stay close," Cale murmured, more to himself than to the boy. I do not know what waits in the shadows, but I will not let it harm you." The boy nodded, his small hand brushing against Kale's cloak. In that single, silent gesture, an unspoken promise passed between them, a bond formed not of blood, but of trust, curiosity, and the faint stirrings of something neither of them could yet name. And then from the far end of the hall came a sound, a whisper, soft and chilling, echoing through the stones. It was a name Cale had never spoken aloud, a memory he had tried to bury, a shadow from the past he thought long dead. The boy's eyes widened, and Cale felt his heart tighten in a way he had not felt in centuries. The castle, the mist, the shadows, they all seemed to hold their breath. And in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty. The night had only just begun. The wind had died, leaving only a thick, silver mist curling through the empty halls of Blackthorn Castle. Cale and the boy stood in the great circular hall, where shadows clung to the walls like dark memories. The whisper that had come from the far corner of the hall still lingered in Cale's mind. A name, a single syllable that carried centuries of guilt, loss, and fear. The boy had not flinched. Instead, he had repeated the name quietly, as if speaking it aloud could somehow make it less dangerous. Cale's golden eyes, normally cold and piercing, softened for a brief moment. He felt something stir deep inside, a mixture of dread, curiosity, and an unfamiliar warmth. "You know too much," Cale said, his voice low and steady, though there was an edge of unease. "No child should know this name." The boy tilted his head, amber eyes shining in the pale moonlight. "I know enough," he said simply. "Enough to see that you are not the monster the stories say you are, but I also know that the past is not done with you or with me." Cale's lips tightened. The boy's words were strangely accurate, and yet he had spoken them with the innocence of someone who had not yet carried the weight of the world. Cale had faced armies, magicians, and creatures of darkness, and yet this small human unsettled him more than all of them combined. "Then you will learn," Cale said finally, moving toward the nearest balcony. The castle stretched out below them like a sleeping giant, broken towers and shattered walls glinting in the moonlight. "But there are things you cannot understand. Things that would frighten even the bravest heart." The boy followed, stepping lightly across the marble floor. "I am not afraid," he said. "Not of shadows, not of monsters, and not of the truth." Cale paused, studying him. The child's courage was unlike anything he had seen in centuries. Most humans ran at the first sign of danger. Most children cried at the shadows of their own imagination. But this one, he was different. He seemed to carry knowledge and strength far beyond his years. And perhaps that was why Cale could not stop thinking about him. The balcony overlooked the inner courtyard, where the remains of old statues were barely visible through the mist. Cale's mind drifted to the past, to days long buried under centuries of dust and memory. The castle had once been alive with laughter, music, and the power of kings. He had ruled it with iron and fire, commanding fear and respect. But those days were gone, burned away by betrayal and regret. The boy's voice broke the silence. "Why did you leave it all behind?" Cale turned sharply, golden eyes narrowing. "Because the world demanded it," he said. "Because what I once sought to protect was lost." "Lost to who?" the boy asked, stepping closer. "To yourself." Cale's fangs itched, but he did not bare them. The boy's words, innocent yet probing, struck something within him. He had spent centuries hiding from his own failures, building walls of stone around his heart. And yet, here was someone small enough to slip through the cracks and see him clearly. "The past is a chain," Cale said finally, his voice quiet. "And some chains cannot be broken without blood and fire." The boy's eyes did not widen in fear. Instead, he nodded as if he understood. "Then it is good that I am here. Because chains can also be broken by courage and by truth." Cale felt a tug in his chest he could not name. The boy's words were dangerous, for they challenged him, pulled at him, and made him question everything he had believed about himself. For the first time in centuries, he felt a need, not for power, not for conquest, but for connection, understanding, and perhaps redemption. "Come," Kale said at last, turning back toward the hall. "I will show you the place where the past still speaks. But you must promise to listen and not to run." The boy nodded solemnly. "I promise." They moved through the corridors, past halls draped in shadows and time-worn tapestries. The air was heavy with memory. Kale led the child to a small chamber, one that had been sealed for generations. The door creaked as he opened it, revealing a room frozen in time. Dust lay thick upon the furniture, and cobwebs draped like silver veils over forgotten treasures. In the center stood a mirror, its surface dull and cracked, reflecting not only their images but also faint, ghostly shapes behind them. "This mirror," Kale said, his voice low, reverent, "is not ordinary. It reflects more than the face. It reflects the truth within the soul. Look carefully, child, and see what it shows you." The boy stepped forward, amber eyes wide, and peered into the glass. At first he saw only himself, small, pale, and human. But slowly shadows shifted, forming images of a man cloaked in darkness, golden eyes glowing, fangs bared. Kale's reflection moved independently, alive with centuries of power and sorrow. The boy did not flinch. Instead, he whispered, "I see sadness, and regret, and fear." Kale's chest tightened. No one had ever spoken of his fear. No one had ever dared call it out. And yet here it was, mirrored back at him by the eyes of a child. "You see well," Kale said, his voice softer than before. "Few ever do." The boy stepped closer. "And yet I feel hope," he said, "because even in the darkness you can change. You can choose another path." Kale's eyes, usually so sharp and unyielding, softened. The boy's words stirred memories of a time when he had been human, not a predator, not a ruler, but someone capable of love and loss, of mistakes and mercy. The thought was dangerous, tempting, and yet irresistible. "Why do you care?" Kale asked, his voice nearly a whisper. "You do not know me, you do not understand the weight I carry." The boy's gaze met his, unwavering and clear. "I know enough," he said. "Enough to see that even the strongest chains can be broken if someone dares to try. And I think you want to try." Kale looked away, his jaw tight. The boy was right. He did want to try. The centuries of isolation, the armor of power, the fear of himself, they all pressed against him, yet he felt the first stirrings of something long forgotten: trust. As the night deepened, the mist outside thickened, curling through the broken windows like living fingers. Kale and the boy heard the faint sound of footsteps, or perhaps whispers, moving through the castle's many halls. Kale stiffened, golden eyes scanning the shadows. "Someone else is here," he murmured, his voice tense. The boy did not run. He simply nodded, his expression calm but alert. "I can feel it. They are waiting, watching." Kale's fangs itched, but he remained silent, thinking, calculating. Whoever or whatever was in the castle was patient, silent, and dangerous. But he would not leave the boy alone. Not now. Not ever. They moved carefully through the castle, Kale's senses straining to detect any movement. The shadows seemed to shift, bending toward them, almost alive. The boy's small hand brushed against Kale's cloak, a silent reassurance. Kale felt a warmth at the gesture, a spark of connection he had not felt in centuries. They reached the grand hall where once kings had feasted and queens had danced. Now it was empty, silent, except for the echoes of the past. Kale paused, sensing a presence behind one of the shattered pillars. The mist swirled, revealing a faint outline, a figure cloaked in darkness watching them with unseen eyes. The boy's gaze followed the shadow. "They are close," he said, calm but alert. "And they know you are here." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Then it is time to face them," he said, his voice low and steady. "Whatever waits in the shadows, I will not let it harm you." The shadow shifted, almost smiling, before retreating into the deeper darkness of the hall. Kale's instincts told him that this was only the beginning. The castle was awakening, the past was stirring, and the boy's knowledge was more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Kale knelt, bringing his golden eyes level with the child's. "We must be ready," he said. "The night is far from over, and soon the past will demand its due." The boy nodded, amber eyes wide but steady. "I am ready," he said, "and I will not run, not from the shadows and not from you." Cale felt a pull in his chest he could not name. He had faced darkness for centuries, but the child's courage and insight felt like a light, fragile and unwavering. And in that light he saw a path, a way to face the past, to protect the present, and perhaps to find redemption. And as the mist thickened and the shadows whispered their secrets, Cale knew one truth with certainty. The night had only just begun, and whatever was coming would test them both in ways neither could yet imagine. The castle's halls seemed to breathe as the mist thickened, curling like living fingers through every broken archway and shattered window. Blackthorn Castle, once a place of grandeur and fear, now stood as a silent witness to centuries of memory and regret. Cale's golden eyes glinted in the pale light, alert and sharp. He had walked these halls for hundreds of years, yet tonight every shadow felt heavier, every whisper more urgent. The boy followed closely, his small feet making no sound on the cold stone. There was a courage in him Cale could not fully understand. Most humans, especially children, would have fled at the first sign of danger. Yet this one moved like he belonged, like he had been waiting for this moment all his life. Cale paused at the top of the grand staircase, the wind blowing through broken windows and carrying with it a chill that cut to the bone. "Something is near," he murmured, his voice low, almost a growl. "And it is not friendly." The boy looked up at him, amber eyes steady. "I can feel it too," he said. "They are watching, waiting for the wrong moment." Cale's fangs itched, but he did not bare them. This presence was different from any enemy he had faced. It was cunning, patient, and deliberate, a shadow that had been following him for years. Or perhaps centuries. Cale could not be certain. "They have known I would return," he said, moving down the staircase, "and now they will not let us leave, not until they have tested us." The boy nodded but did not speak. His gaze was fixed ahead, watching the shadows stretch across the halls, as if he could see what Cale could not. The connection between them, fragile and new, gave Cale a strange comfort. For the first time, he felt that he was not entirely alone in his centuries of darkness. They reached the grand hall where broken pillars and shattered statues formed jagged lines of shadow. Cale paused, listening. There it was, a movement, subtle and deliberate. He could feel it in the air, a ripple of energy that hinted at intelligence, patience, and danger. "Stay behind me," Cale said quietly, his voice steady but firm. "And do not make a sound." The boy obeyed, eyes wide but calm. He trusted Cale completely, and that trust struck something deep within the vampire. It was both terrifying and comforting. Cale had ruled through fear for centuries, yet here, in this ruined castle, he found that trust could be more powerful than fear. A figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, cloaked in darkness, moving with a silence that betrayed both skill and patience. Its eyes glimmered with a cold, calculating light. Cale tensed. This was no ordinary foe, it was a shadow of the past, a reflection of all the enemies he had once feared, and yet far more dangerous. "Cale," the figure said, voice smooth and deliberate, "you should not have returned." Cale stepped forward, cloak flowing like liquid shadow behind him. "And you should not be here," he replied. "This castle is mine, and the child, he is under my protection." The figure laughed, low and soft, echoing through the hall. "Protection? From what? The past cannot be stopped and the future is not yours to command." Cale's eyes narrowed. The words struck deep, pulling memories of betrayal and loss from the darkest corners of his mind. He remembered a time when he had trusted, when he had believed in love and loyalty, and how both had been twisted and broken. The boy stepped forward, unafraid. "You are not alone," he said, voice clear and unwavering. "And the past will not control you unless you let it. You have a choice." Cale looked at the child, his heart, long unused to warmth or hope stirring. He felt the weight of centuries pressing down, the shadows of mistakes and sins he had long tried to bury. And yet here was this small human, fearless and honest, challenging him, demanding that he face the truth he had avoided for so long. The shadow moved closer, circling them like a predator testing its prey. "You cannot protect him," it said, voice a whisper of menace. "He is tied to your past, and the past cannot be escaped." Kale's fangs glimmered faintly, but he did not strike. "Then let the past come," he said, voice low and steady. "I will face it, and I will not fail him." The figure paused, almost impressed. "Bold words," it said. "But the night is long, and the castle has many eyes." Kale's golden gaze swept the room. The shadows seemed to pulse, alive with secrets and memories. Every corner of the castle whispered of the centuries he had ruled, fought, and feared. But now, with the boy at his side, those whispers felt less like warnings and more like guidance. "Look," the boy said suddenly, pointing toward a shattered pillar. "They are not just watching, they are waiting for a mistake." Kale's eyes followed the gesture. Indeed, in the darkest corner of the hall he could see movement, subtle, almost imperceptible, but deliberate. A trap, a test. He could not be certain, but he knew one thing: he could not fail. Not now, not ever, not with this child standing beside him. He took a deep breath, drawing strength from the child's courage. "Stay close," he whispered, "and trust me." The boy nodded, amber eyes glowing in the moonlight. "I do." Kale moved forward, every sense alert. The shadows stretched and shifted as he passed, responding to his presence, but he did not falter. He had faced darkness for centuries, and yet tonight the weight of responsibility felt heavier than any enemy he had encountered. Suddenly the shadow moved faster, springing from the darkness with a speed that made Kale's heart beat faster. But Kale was ready. He stepped aside, swift and silent, letting the figure pass him. The shadow collided with the far wall, dissipating into mist like smoke, leaving only silence behind. Kale exhaled slowly, golden eyes scanning every corner. "They are testing us," he said, voice low. "Every shadow, every whisper, every step is a test." The boy stepped closer. "Then we will pass," he said. "Together." Kale's heart stirred at the words. There was something extraordinary in the child's faith, a belief in him that he had not dared feel in centuries. For the first time, Kale allowed himself a small flicker of hope. Perhaps he could face the past. Perhaps he could protect the boy. Perhaps, even, he could find redemption. They moved deeper into the castle, past halls where portraits of long-dead rulers glared down with accusing eyes. Kale's mind wandered, memories of betrayal and loss surfacing with each step. He remembered a love he had once cherished, a trust he had once given freely, and the betrayal that had shattered it all. He had buried the pain, wrapped it in shadows and silence, and vowed never to feel it again. But now, with the boy beside him, the memories were not as sharp, not as cold. They were tempered by something new: connection, hope, and the possibility of forgiveness. As they reached the inner courtyard, Kale felt the presence again. It was stronger now, closer, as if the shadow had been guiding them toward this moment. The courtyard was empty, save for the remnants of statues and broken fountains, yet the air felt charged with energy. "Here," Kale whispered, his voice echoing in the open space. "This is where the past will speak." The boy stepped forward, amber eyes scanning the shadows. "I can feel it," he said. "They are here, and they are waiting for you to face them." Kale nodded, golden eyes narrowing. He could feel the weight of centuries pressing down, the shadows of mistakes and regrets stirring in the mist. And yet, he did not falter. He would face the past, protect the child, and confront the shadow that had haunted him for so long. From the far side of the courtyard, movement emerged. A figure stepped into the moonlight, cloaked in darkness, face hidden but presence undeniable. Kale's heart, long untouched by fear, tightened. This was not just a shadow, it was a memory, a test, a reflection of everything he had tried to escape. The boy did not flinch. He stepped forward, hand brushing against Kale's cloak. "I am ready," he said, "and I trust you." Kale felt a surge of warmth, a strange, unfamiliar emotion. Courage, connection, hope. The shadows might be long, the night might be deep, but together they were stronger than any darkness that sought to challenge them. Kale's golden eyes met the figure in the courtyard. "I am ready," he said, voice low but steady. "Whatever comes, I will not fail." The figure tilted its head, a slow, deliberate movement that seemed almost mocking. And then, without a sound, it vanished into the shadows, leaving only a faint whisper trailing in the cold night air. "You cannot hide from what you have done and what you must face." Kale's fists tightened. The boy's small hand rested on his cloak, grounding him, reminding him that he was not alone. And in that moment, Kale understood one truth. The night was far from over, and the path ahead would demand everything he had, and more. But for the first time in centuries, he did not feel fear. He felt resolve, and the child standing beside him felt the same. Together, they would face the shadows. And together, they would find a way to change the past, or be consumed by it. The mist hung heavy over Blackthorn Castle, curling through the towers and halls like a living thing. The night was deep, silent, but for the whispers of shadows moving through the ancient stones. Kale stood in the grand courtyard, golden eyes glinting in the pale moonlight. Beside him, the child's small form radiated courage, his amber eyes shining with quiet determination. Kale could feel it, the presence that had been stalking them, patient and cunning, waiting for centuries for this night. The castle itself seemed to pulse with energy, as if sensing the coming confrontation. The boy placed a small hand on Kale's cloak, grounding him, reminding him that he was not alone. "Are you ready?" Kale asked, voice low but steady. The boy nodded. "I've never been afraid," he said. "Not tonight, not with you." Kale exhaled slowly. For centuries, he had faced armies, monsters, and even the darkest of sorcery, yet tonight, his heart raced with a tension he had not felt in ages. He realized something he had not allowed himself to feel for hundreds of years: hope. The shadows shifted. From the deepest corner of the courtyard, a figure emerged. Tall, cloaked in darkness, its presence both commanding and terrifying. The air itself seemed to thicken around it, carrying centuries of malice and patience. Kale's fangs glimmered faintly, though he did not bare them. This would not be a battle of teeth or claws. It would be a test of courage, trust, and truth. "You have returned, Kale," the shadow said, voice smooth and deliberate. "And you have brought him with you." Kale's golden eyes narrowed. "You speak of a child," he said, "but he is no pawn. He is strong, clever, and braver than you can imagine." The shadow's gaze flicked to the boy. For the briefest moment, Kale saw hesitation in the darkness. It had underestimated the child. That would be its first mistake. "You cannot escape the past," the shadow said, voice low like the rustle of dead leaves. "All you have done, all you have hidden, will come to light tonight." Kale's chest tightened, but he did not falter. "Then let it come," he said. "The past may be heavy, but I will face it. And I will not fail him." The boy stepped closer to Kale. "Together," he said softly, "no matter what comes." Kale felt a spark of warmth at the words: trust, courage, hope. The child had given him something he had not felt in centuries: the possibility of redemption. The shadow moved closer, and the mist thickened around them. Shapes formed in the fog, ghostly reminders of Kale's past, the faces of those he had wronged, the eyes of those he had failed. Kale's heart ached as memories surfaced, memories he had buried beneath centuries of darkness. "You see them," the shadow said, voice cold and sharp. "All the pain you caused, all the lives you touched with fear and sorrow. You cannot run from it." Kale's golden eyes met the child's. "We must face it," he whispered, "and we will." The boy's hand tightened on his cloak. "I will be with you," he said, "every step, every shadow, every memory." Kale took a deep breath and stepped forward. The mist swirled, revealing the figures of the past, phantoms of betrayal, loss, and sorrow. They were not enemies now, but reflections of truth. Kale felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him, yet he also felt a strange lightness, the first taste of freedom from the chains he had carried so long. The shadow, sensing his resolve, hissed softly. "You think courage alone will save you," it said. "The past is not so easily undone." Kale's gaze hardened. "I am not alone," he said, "and the past will not control me anymore." He extended a hand toward the phantoms. The mist shimmered, and slowly, one by one, the faces softened. The anger and sorrow in their eyes gave way to understanding, even forgiveness. Kale felt the centuries of guilt begin to lift, like chains falling from his shoulders. The shadow recoiled, realizing that Kale's power was not in fear, not in strength, but in the courage to face himself and the past. And beside him, the child radiated a light that no darkness could touch, a reminder that hope could exist even in the deepest shadow. "You have changed," the shadow whispered, almost incredulous. "You are no longer the Kale I knew." Kale's golden eyes glinted. "I am still Kale," he said, "but I am not alone, and that makes all the difference." The shadow paused, then slowly dissipated into the mist, leaving only silence behind. The castle seemed to exhale, the heavy weight of centuries lifting as if approving the choice Kale had made. Kale turned to the child, whose amber eyes shone with quiet triumph. "We did it," the boy said softly. "The past, it can't hurt us now." Kale knelt, bringing his golden eyes level with the boy's. "You were brave," he said, "stronger than I could have imagined. You taught me something I had forgotten. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to face it." The boy smiled faintly. "And you taught me that even the darkest hearts can change," he said. "Even the shadows can be turned into light." Kale felt a warmth spread through him that he had not known in centuries. The castle, once a place of fear and sorrow, now felt alive with possibility. The walls no longer whispered accusations. They sang of redemption, of hope, of beginnings. "Perhaps," Kale said softly, "this castle will no longer be a tomb of shadows. Perhaps it can be a home for both of us." The boy's eyes widened with a quiet wonder. "A home," he echoed. "Yes, a home." Kale rose, stretching his cloak around him. Together they walked through the halls, the shadows no longer threatening but following them gently, like echoes of a life redeemed. Every step was lighter, every breath freer, every glance filled with the understanding that they had faced the darkest parts of the past and emerged stronger together. As dawn approached, the first pale light of morning brushed the towers of the castle. The mist began to lift, revealing the courtyard, the broken fountains, and the ancient stone walls in a soft, golden glow. Kale and the boy stood together on the balcony, looking out over the land, the weight of centuries finally beginning to ease. "You see," the boy said, "even the darkest night can end in light. Even the heaviest shadows can be lifted." Kale's golden eyes softened. "And even the most burdened hearts can find redemption," he said. "Thank you for showing me that." The child smiled, small and radiant, a light in the long night. "No," he said. "Thank you for trusting me." For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the dawn spread over the hills. The wind carried a hint of warmth, a promise of new beginnings, and the castle itself seemed to breathe in the fresh air, alive with possibility. And yet, as the sunlight touched the towers, Kale sensed something faint, a ripple in the mist, a whisper of movement far away. The shadow that had tested him had retreated, but it had not vanished entirely. It waited, patient and cunning, knowing that the story was far from over. The boy noticed it too. He gripped Kale's cloak lightly, amber eyes sharp. "It's still there," he said quietly. "Waiting." Kale nodded. His golden eyes narrowed, but this time there was no fear, only readiness, courage, and trust. "Then we will face it," he said. "Together." The boy nodded, small but unwavering. "Together." And as the first rays of sun touched Blackthorn Castle, Kale understood a truth older than time itself. The shadows could always return, the past could always challenge him, but the bond they had forged, the courage, the trust, the light of hope, would endure. The castle was no longer just a fortress of fear. It was a place of life, of redemption, of beginnings. And Kale, the alpha vampire and the child who had dared to know his secret, would walk forward into the future, ready for whatever shadows might come next. For the first time in centuries, Kale's heart was unburdened, his spirit renewed, and his soul touched by light. The night had ended, but the story had only just begun.